Hello and welcome into the Next Gen podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I am joined by my co-host, Alex Winton. And we got another great show to get to today. We have to talk about the end of the FIBA World Cup because it was a surprising finish for a lot of people, including both of us. We're going to talk about that. And then we also got to talk about this new player resting policy that the NBA is going to be implementing this next season and talk about how it will affect the Grizzlies going forward. But yeah, so let's get back to the FIBA World Cup. I know the last time we talked, it was going into the semifinals. Team USA and Team Canada, who we both were kind of thinking had a really good chance to be the gold medal game, both ended up losing their semifinals games to Serbia and Germany and ended up playing the bronze medal game. Before we get into this, congratulations to Germany and congratulations to Dennis Schroeder on winning MVP and everything like that. I think it was a cool scene to see him go back and then really get embraced by the fans in Germany. I thought that was pretty cool, just from the outside looking in. Obviously, still hope that Team USA could have pulled it out, but I mean, it definitely looks like it meant a lot to that country and a lot to the fans and everybody who came out to that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And shout out to Serbia too for really shocking a lot of people because Jokic didn't play. Once Jokic didn't play, a lot of people just kind of thought they just had no chance to do anything, and they ended up being the silver medal team. So shout out to both of them. But everybody knows the biggest thing that you talk about when you come to this podcast, we got to talk about the Grizzly stuff. We got to talk about Jaren. So we got to talk about Team USA, and we got to talk about them not just losing, but not coming away with a medal. And I know going into this, there were a lot of people that had questions about the team. I had some questions about the team too, but I still think that they proved they had, I think they had the talent to go further than they did. They ended up losing by 2 to Germany. That's a couple stops here and there. So it's not like they just weren't talented enough to go as far as they did. But it just really felt like down the stretch, the execution, whether it was players or coaching, like all together, just didn't really work together. I felt like. I don't know if there's really one person you can put all the blame on. I know a lot of people were putting some blame on Jaren, which I agree he does deserve some blame, not all of the blame, which we'll get into that too. But there's a lot of different people that made mistakes, and I think that it really just comes down to defensively they weren't as good, just top to bottom, as they probably should have been, especially in those last couple games against Canada and against Germany where they gave up some of the most points of anybody in the tournament in those games. And it was just really a struggle for them on defense. And I think that was surprising for a lot of people. And I also think they did have some issues with kind of the lineups they were running along with the personnel they had to kind of match up with some of these European teams that had two bigs or a team like Germany that plays both Mo and Franz Wagner along with Daniel Tice. And that's basically three people that are like 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". Like the Team USA really wasn't used to that. They played a guard heavy lineup, smaller bigs and Paolo and Jaren who aren't really used to playing the five. So there was a lot of stuff like in terms of roster construction that I feel like as the tournament went on, the other teams like kind of figured that out. So I think that's why maybe in the exhibition games, it didn't seem as big of an issue, but it kind of seemed like as the tournament went on, teams looked at the film from the other games and found out the ways they could beat Team USA, whether it's being physical on the interior, whether it's playing multiple bigs and attacking the glass. Like that was all stuff that we saw a lot of. And then really attacking on the perimeter, getting a lot of three-pointers. I think that's what we saw from every team, Lithuania when they won and Germany when they beat Team USA. They both hit some really big threes. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff in those last two games.
Yeah. To start, I had to rewatch the games, or really, so I woke up to the scores and stuff. And to your point, when I woke up and saw like my first initial reaction to them losing to Germany, I looked at the score and looked at 113 points. Like defensively, like you said, that's uh just not good enough, especially for like or in a FIBA World Cup where you're basically you don't have a longer game, like it's 10 minutes, you know what I mean, 10 minutes of court, like the games are shorter. So I
It's
think
like
really
giving up 113
Yeah,
in the length of a college game. So it's like even
yeah,
it's even worse, really,
crazy.
in that
Yes,
way.
exactly. Crazy. So, yeah, I think it comes down to really mainly two, three things. Like you said, really mainly for me defensively, and then obviously the coaching and slash roster construction. Because I know people said they were surprised that Team USA gave up this many points, which to a degree I get it. But when you really look at it and break it down, like and sit with it, it really it's not much of a surprise because when you build your roster around a lot of smaller guards instead of actual wings and forwards, and then you expect to play a lineup with bigs that are not usually accustomed to playing the five, so you're basically playing small ball the whole time. It makes your margin of error a lot more slimmer, and that's basically what happened with them is that their defense had to basically be perfect along with their offense just to even make up for the lack of size. Whereas it wasn't even all about the glass, but just having guys where they were bigger and could pick on guys like Austin Reeves, who's 6'5", and they could just get a bucket whenever when they were because they play switching defense. And so if you're going to do that, they're just going to pick, hunt mismatches. And that's basically what happened with them, especially during that Germany game where obviously, Jaren got a lot of blame for, which I'll get into in a minute. Like, when you really look at it, just they couldn't guard anybody. Like, and they were hunting Reeves the whole fourth quarter. And so I just think, again, it just showed up at the wrong time. And obviously the Canada game is what it was. I mean, obviously you can say they didn't, I mean, they could have won that game, obviously, but like Jaren didn't play, Brandon Ingram didn't play. I think like there was 3 or 4 people that didn't play. So I didn't really take too much of that game. But the Germany game, besides Brandon Ingram, everybody's available. So it's kind of like, I think the roster construction could have been better. I think they could have been better in terms of looking for wings. Like, because if you think about their wing position, I mean, Cam Johnson's like 6'8", 6'7", but he didn't play a lot. Brandon Ingram was out. So then that makes you what I think your tallest wings, Mikal Bridges. Everybody else is like 6'5", 6'6", or 6'5", 6'4" with your guards. But and also you're bringing guards that are not really great defensively. Like Tyrese Halliburton's never been a great defender. Jalen Brunson's never been a great defender. It can be a great defender, but he's inconsistent. So when your point of attack defense is inconsistent, that puts more pressure on your bigs to be perfect, which aka Jaren, and it's gonna be easier, for them to just get to wherever. And so that's
Mhm.
why you might see a lot of clips where, somebody's getting blown by and then Jaren has to help, but then that's leaving the big open because, you know, they're not helping the helper. So, I think that's really on really Kerr and Grant Hill to really fix that roster. And I mean they will. Obviously, there's been reports about what's going to happen with you know their actual USA team, but I'm not really that worried honestly. Because again, people got to understand like first off, they didn't medal, they did improve from last FIBA Cup, and I think there was a stat basically they've only won like 3 FIBA Cups since like I think two early 2000s. Like they don't FIBA usually they don't really care about. Like stars don't really go to FIBA as much as they used to. So, my thing is until they lose in the Olympics, I'm not gonna be too worried about it. You know what I mean? People could have played better, coaches could have been better. I think Kerr could have made a few adjustments in terms of playing bigger lineups. I think he should have played Jaren and Apollo together, Jaren and Kessler together, see if that would have worked. Like at least give it a try. I'm not saying it would have worked all the way, but at least like to not go to it is kind of crazy to me. But I kind of get it because that's what he's used to in his system. But yeah, I'm not too worried. Obviously, it's a disappointing thing with them just because I expected them to get gold, but at the same time, I'm not too surprised. What's like when you really think about it, because defense is always going to be their Achilles heel to me. I said if they defend, they're going to beat anybody, but if they don't, they can lose, and that's literally what happens. So, but I mean, I think all these players are going to have they'll bounce back and stuff like that. Like I'm not worried about anybody's play here at FIBA. Like because there was some last thing. There was some people talking about stock dropping because of FIBA. Like it's different games. Like players are going to be better in their actual teams and respective offenses and systems. Like I'm not gonna
Mhm.
like players are going to be better. Brandon Ingram's not going to look like what he did during FIBA. Jaren's not going to look like what he did during FIBA. Jalen Brunson, like all these guys are going to be like all-star level players this year. Like so, yeah. But they'll be fine. But yeah, I mean it is disappointing, but at the same time, hey, it happens. You know what I mean? Like it's not the first time they lost, and it might not be the last.
Yeah, the last thing I do say before we kind of move on to more like Jaren focused stuff is Dylan Brooks had 39 in the bronze medal game. I wish I like just seeing that and then seeing some of the highlights of it. Like, dude, where was that in the playoffs, man? Like, we just needed that one game. One game. That's all we needed, man. We needed one game. And I just watching that. 39 points. I think he hit like 7 3-pointers. And I was just like, man, where has this been? You know, but maybe it's the Grizzlies. Maybe the Grizzlies have bad vibes or something, and he couldn't shoot the ball for the Grizzlies, and he can only do it again, at FIBA for some reason. But yeah, no, that was insane to watch that performance just after what happened in the playoffs, just like the drastic difference in how he played. And it's just crazy because just going like the last time you saw him was that playoff performance. And now to see how he played in FIBA. That's why the whole thing about does stock drop from FIBA? No, because it's just completely different. Like it's like an alternate reality where Dylan Brooks has 40 pieces in important games. Like it's almost like it's just a completely different place. But yeah. So we do got to talk about Jaren though, because like you said, there's a lot of people that have put a lot of the blame on Jaren. And like I said at the beginning of this, Jaren definitely deserves as much of the blame as anybody else does on the team. He did not do what the coaching staff asked of him, right? Like that's simply simple enough. He didn't do what the coaching staff asked of him. This coaching staff needed him to be a rim protector and also dominate the glass, right? But Jaren has never been good, has never been a good rebounder, just overall. Paulo isn't a great rebounder either, just overall. I mean, he's good for his position, but he's not good enough to be the main guy in a thing like a FIBA tournament where you have to be the main rebounder and you're playing the five. Like that's just not what he does. If anybody on the roster could have been that, it would have been Walker Kessler, just because he's more used to that. He's a better rebounder. But I think that just between him and Jaren, there's some things where it's like Walker Kessler does bring you rebounding, but he doesn't bring you as much spacing and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. I would have liked to see them play Jaren and Walker Kessler together some, play Jaren and Paulo together some, just so there's another big out there, because I feel like there was a lot of times where you don't really have true wings or true kind of power forwards or any small forwards really. I mean, you had Macau, but it really felt like they were playing a lot of either guards or like big guards, because like Brandon Ingram, he's technically a forward, but he's basically just like a tall guard. He doesn't really play like a forward. He doesn't bring a lot of forward stuff. So it's like when you really look at who's out there, you've got Jalen Brunson, you've got Josh Hart, you've got, if there's Austin Reeves is playing out there, like all of the guys that you're coming in, even coming off the bench when it was Halliburton, whether it's Anthony Edwards, who obviously he was starting, but it's like all these guys that Jaren played with, whether they were starting or off the bench, were mostly either guards or big guards that really like rebounding is not really their thing either. So I think that was really the main issue is they got killed on the glass. Like they didn't bring anybody besides, I feel like Kessler, maybe Bobby Portis, who is really like a above average rebounder. And I think that really did come back to bite him, just because I feel like that's such a big deal in FIBA games, because there's a lot more back to the basket play, a lot of more actual big men than you will see in an NBA game. So I think that really did come back to bite him. I think Jalen Brunson, not to say that he didn't play well, I think he played all right, but I feel like just the offense flowed a lot better when Halliburton was in the game. And I feel like if Jaren had played more with Halliburton, maybe he would have scored a little bit more in those games, just because I felt like in all the games when he played with Halliburton, he ended up scoring a lot more in his minutes with Halliburton than with Brunson, just because I feel like he was more searching for other guys a lot more. And I think that that's something that maybe I think Jaren's the kind of guy that kind of when he starts the game, he has to get off to a good start. And if he gets off to a bad start, it can become a bad game very quickly. And I think they did a lot of that, like in the exhibitions games, trying to get him going offensively. And I feel like they went away from that as the tournament went on. But he also took himself out of that by getting in foul trouble and stuff like that. So it's not just completely on the coaching staff. And it's not to say I'm making a bunch of excuses for him, because at the end of the day, Jaren had to be better and he wasn't. So, but just there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. So it's not just to say it's just his fault that they lost the games. I think there's a lot of people you could put the blame on. But yeah, he definitely takes some of it. And I mean, yeah, got to be better on the glass and then got to stay out of foul trouble. But those are the two things that I think most people would say Jaren needed to work on 2 years ago. So it's like it's the same stuff he has to continue to get better at. He has gotten a little bit better. Obviously, the fouls haven't been as bad. The rebounding has gotten better, but it's just like kind of taking that next step on both of those accounts as well.
Yeah, agreed. I remember seeing a tweet about the Jaren stuff because again, I like I said, I said it before and I say it again. He's one of the more polarizing players in this league, and I say it because again, it's not about how he acts, it's about his game. Because either people hate him or love him. Because I knew that because when I looked at the Germany game and people were talking about the game and they just showed his box score, I was like, all right, let me look at the game. And obviously he gets blamed. It's not me making excuses for him. But it's like I'm looking at the game and I'm seeing everybody else not playing defense just like him or not rebound. Like it was a whole team thing. Like I'm big. I always say blame pies. If we're going by blame pies, how much blame that like Jaren can get a good chunk of the blame, but I'd give that to the guards too and everybody else involved. Like I don't think it's like a big like I wouldn't just put it all on him. He obviously had to be better, but again, like you said, a lot of that goes to him. Just some of it on him, and some of it on the actual roster construction. You knew Jaren was a poor rebounder or inconsistent rebounder because he did just come off of having career high rebounds this year, and obviously I think he averaged like 8, 9 boards in the playoffs. So he can rebound. It's just very inconsistent. But at the same time, you have to build lineups around Jaren where it highlights his best stuff. So it's not ideal to have a lineup with 6'5" guys, and basically I think the your place is playing a power forward with 6'6" with Mikal Bridges at that time, a small ball, and he plays more of a combo guard than he does, like you said, like a dual forward. Like they had no real like Jason Tatum's on this roster like where you can play 3 and 4. You had one with Paulo, but he only played him at the 5, which is why I said I would like to see it because even though Paulo, he only had one season, I think he was a solid rebound. I think he averaged like 6 or 7 rebounds, and he's 6'10", 6'8", or I mean 6'10" and like 250. So it's like he would be able to rebound a little bit, and you'd be able to, and he can move. So it's not like you're playing a guy that's slow footed. You have some versatility with size still, even though he couldn't shoot. So it's kind of like, I think that could have been a solution. Obviously, offensively, I think I don't really worry about the offense. I just think he didn't get him, like you said, it didn't get as involved because teams just, they didn't give him the ball as much. But also, like you said, like we talked about with fouls, like him taking himself out of the game. There's a couple games where, our last three really, he took himself out the game because of the foul trouble. So it's hard to really establish an offensive rhythm if you're going to be in foul trouble all the time, and you're already taking limited shots as well. Like I don't think he had a really game where he took 10 shots. He's usually taking anywhere from like 3 to like 7 shots. So you know what I mean. You got to make them count. Um, he could have shot the ball better too, but he didn't take a lot of threes. But yeah, I don't think he was bad per se. He wasn't good, but I mean, I think he was good in spurts. You know what I mean? I think he was good to start, but obviously it tailed off as the last 3 games went on. But I feel like that's Team USA in general. Like it just wasn't him, And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for Jaren because he could have been better. And if he was better, they might have changed their fortunes might have been, they had a different outcome. But I'm not like worried about Jaren. I mean, stuff like you said would that happen, we already knew about. And in Memphis, we have time. We'll have a lineup to cover that. Like we'll have lineups where we play actual power forward next to Jaren, not just some smaller guard. The only time we might have us play a smaller guard is if we're playing Golden State and they play small like that, and then we have to play super small, or another team plays super small, and we have that type of lineup to do that. But like now, it's like, I'm not really too worried about it. Like, again, Jaren got to be better, but I think it's a lot of it goes into it. Like, like Kerr has to be better in, making a lineup that optimizes Jaren's skills. And that just didn't happen. I mean, obviously, you want to play him at 5, but you got to play him with an actual power forward who knows how to rebound or has size. You know what I mean? Or you got to play him with a point guard that's actually going to get him the ball and stuff like that. Like, and I can say that for other people on this roster. Like, this roster wasn't a clean fit too, because Ingram has struggles too, where Ingram couldn't find his spot. He had to go to the bench because Josh Hart was better as a guy that could be a role player versus Ingram, who needs the ball to have, or needs to have the ball in his hands to be successful, and he's not really a catch and shoot guy. So little stuff like that, I think, he was, Jaren and everybody, some other people face those type of issues. So, but ultimately, I mean, could have been better, but I mean, I'm not really worried. Like, like I said, I'm not that person where it's like, you think your stock is gone. Like, I'm not, no. Like, I think people just want to get, again, it's easy to scapegoat Jaren because you look at the rebounding numbers, you say he's 7 foot, he should rebound better. But again, people don't use
Definitely.
nuance and context. Yeah, people don't use nuance and context. People love to go off of, we'll see tweets where it says Jaren Jackson Jr. stats and not give any context to why the stats happen. You know what I mean? Like, I could do that with anybody. Like we could do that with somebody like Ant and be like, oh, he went 1 for 7 in one game or whatever with no blanket, no context at all, and take whatever we could from that tweet. You know what I mean? So like, I just think people forget to use nuance and context. But I mean, hey, it happens. Like especially with the Grizzlies, it's gonna happen. Like that's just what it is. Like at this point, we because of other stuff. I'm not gonna get into all that, but just like you know, it's not always objective. But I mean, yeah, Jaren will be fine. Team will be fine. Like Jaren's gonna come back this season and he's gonna be even better. Watch. I don't expect this FIBA thing to be like a trend. Like I think he's gonna come in the regular season being ready to go. I just especially since he's just played basketball, he'll be in a rhythm, be in shape. So I expect him to start strong. So yeah, I expect Jaren to be good.
Yeah, definitely. And he's going to be in a different role. Obviously, he's going to be playing hopefully with Steven Adams. As far as we know, he's going to be ready for the regular season. So that'll be something good. He'll be playing in a position he's more used to and everything like that. But last thing about FIBA, really not so much about FIBA, but they did qualify for the Olympics during this FIBA run. And one of the things we do got to talk about is the expectations for the Olympics in Paris next year. And people have basically been saying it looks like Team USA is going to send the quote unquote Avengers. Yeah, because we got LeBron, KD, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker. A lot of these guys have been saying that they have either have indicated that they want to go to LeBron or to somebody else, and there's reports of all this. There's a lot of players like that are supposed to go. There's a chance that Desmond Bain gets on that team as like a bench player, which I think would be a very underrated addition. Obviously, I think he's going to get overshadowed a little bit by all of those guys if he does make the team. But I think that that's somebody who could be for like a Grizzlies from the Grizzlies standpoint, he could make it. And I think there is still a possibility Jaren ends up on the Olympic team just because it's going to come down to what big men are healthy and what big men are actually going to play for Team USA. Like, I mean, there's been a question on will Joel Embiid play for Team USA now that he has USA citizenship and everything like that. So he could play for Team USA if he wanted to. But will he? Will he not? What's Bam Adebayo going to do? So there's a lot of other stuff that you're going to have to look at. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be Steph, LeBron, KD, Booker, Tatum. I'm expecting all those guys to go. I'm expecting Jimmy Butler. Like a lot of the guys from the last team, along with it's basically going to be like a greatest hits of the last like 2 or 3 Olympic teams. It kind of feels like, minus Carmelo, obviously, because he is retired. But he had his great run with Team USA and everything. But I think that I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be cool. I'm excited to get for the roster to get officially finalized and kind of see who's really going to be ready to take on that challenge at the end of next season. But I think the expectations for now, I mean, you got to think that if they send those guys, they're going to get the gold medal like they have the last 4 times they've gone to the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, it's just again, like I said earlier, it doesn't. I don't worry about the Olympics with Team USA. Like FIBA, sure, but like proofs in the pudding. They haven't lost an Olympics since like 2004. Like this is proof. This is not me just saying whatever. Like Olympic games, they bring their best usually, and even if they don't bring their best, they bring like the second best. So you know what I mean. So it's kind of like I'm not really too worried. Like I mean, yeah, like I think LeBron, Steph, KD, you're talking about like 3 top 10 players like in the league still right now. Obviously Tatum, AD, Draymond, and then again, I mean if if we're talking about that, bam, like I think some of the people from last team will be there. I think there's people that could make it from this FIBA team, but it's only a few. I mean, I personally think Ant and Jaren are kind of, and I say Mikal Bridges, those 3 guys, just because they have like actual like I could say they have 1 or 2 skills that could really help Team USA even in a limited role. Like Ant could be on that team and score some points and if they need like a spark off the bench or something like that. Jaren can obviously defend especially if you're playing with Anthony Davis and stuff like that. You have another rim protector, especially even if he's not starting. And same with Mikal Bridges, he could be a 3-and-D guy, a guy that you could put on the wing and he could switch and guard multiple positions, so you can run that switch defense. So that's why I think those 3 will really be the ones. Obviously, I'm not saying that nobody else could, but those are the guys that stand out from that FIBA team that could possibly make the team. But they might not be on the team just because the team's stacked. Like it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, just the top names alone, I mean, yeah, like they'll win, bro. Like this is Team USA we talking about. I hate to sound like cocky, even though teams are getting better, like around the league or around the world, which as they should. That's great for the game, especially because that means like like the game is becoming more global, which is great, in my opinion. But it's still, we still got a lot of like we still we know who runs this in a way. Like like the proofs in the pudding. And until that changes, like until I see otherwise, I wouldn't think otherwise. Like I expect them to win gold. Like especially with the roster they talking about getting. Like, come on, bro. Steph, KD, and LeBron on the same team. I mean, I don't think we seen. I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe we saw it in an All Star game, but I can't recall when all three was on the same team. So they all on the
Yeah,
same team.
because there was something we were talking about before this. Steph has actually never played on an Olympic team because he
Yep.
was hurt in both 2016 and 2020. So he was not on either one of those teams. I mean, obviously, I think he would have made either one of those teams if he was healthy. And I think that's something that's going to be interesting to see how he plays in that after this next season. I mean, they're all getting a little bit older, so I think that might be a little. It was a little surprising for me to see LeBron and KD, not so much Steph, just because I feel like that's something that he does want on his resume. Is just not to say that his resume needs it, but I think just something to say, he was a gold medalist or he played in the Olympics for Team USA, which is just something he hasn't gotten to do yet. So I had a feeling Steph would be there, but to hear like LeBron and KD sign on again at their age, I think that's really cool to see them kind of recommit to the team and everything. And yeah, I mean, like you said, not to be cocky or anything, it's not gonna be easy. I don't think they're gonna go out there and win every game by 60. I mean, I think they're gonna win a lot of the games by a good amount, but it's the rest of the world is obviously catching up. We saw that by FIBA, but I still think that when Team USA sends their best players, they're going to have the best team. And I mean, that's just what history has showed us, over like since the Redeem team, basically. But yeah, kind of moving on to the last thing that we are going to talk about before we end the show today is the NBA's new resting policy. Because I just thought this was something really interesting. Because I feel like it kind of came out at a weird time. It's kind of in the middle of like no man's land for NBA stuff right now. And if you would hear something like this, you would have expected it to be something that would come out like when they release a new collective bargaining agreement. But this is not something that has to be put into the collective bargaining agreement because all of the fines of this new policy are going to go on the team. So that was something that was a little nuanced thing. So this is something the NBA has just thrown in randomly kind of at this time of the year and it just got approved. So basically for every NBA team, you cannot rest more than one quote unquote star player for each game. So for the Grizzlies, like star player, it is categorized as somebody who's made an all-star team or all-NBA team the last 3 seasons. So for the Grizzlies, John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. cannot both rest in the same game. And those are extremely important and they're going to be a lot more strict on, national TV games and also road games. National TV games, obviously, because I think this is something that's coming from ESP and TNT and the people that are paying these really big TV contracts, and then they feel like they're not getting the full extent of the NBA because when they have these big matchups, it's a lot of times there'll only be one team that's playing their stars, and the other team, it kind of seems like it might be a throwaway game. And I think that's something they're trying to get away from. There's going to be fines, and especially big fines, like I said, on road games, on national TV games, and then games that count toward the new in-season tournament. All of those are going to have heavier fines, and they're going to be really going to be cracking down on those more than anything. But just all in all, it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that like, is there an issue with the amount of time that players are resting? Yes, but I'm not sure if finding the teams and doing it this way is necessarily the best way to go about it. Not to say that I know exactly what the best way to go about it is, and I understand that from the NBA standpoint, it's about making their money and making sure that when they have the next TV contracts coming up, they can show this to the TV deals and say, "Hey, we listen to you. We have more players playing more games." I mean, this is also one of the reasons why they added the 65 game cutoff for all NBA and stuff like that, which honestly, I thought that that was possibly going to be enough for some of the guys just because a lot of that goes into contract stuff. But it still might be for a guy like Kawhi and Paul George and LeBron and some of these guys that are older. Which there is also another little thing where if you're over the age of 35, you can kind of get a little bit more leeway just because they also know that you do have to rest a lot more once you get to that age. So guys like LeBron, Mike Conley, who is affected by this because he made the All-Star team. I think Chris Paul is another one that's going to be affected by this, but is probably going to get a lot of leeway because he's older. But yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting. I like the idea of it. I like the idea behind it, especially the not resting in away games, just because I feel like there are so many times where people might save up just to go to one game because maybe they live in Milwaukee and they're a Bucks fan, but they really wanted to see Steph or they really wanted to see the Grizzlies and wanted to watch Ja play. And it's a night where Ja doesn't play or Steph doesn't play or they're trying to see LeBron and LeBron doesn't play. And it might be their only chance to see him that entire season. So I understand why they put an emphasis on that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to, like, obviously, it's going to have more people playing more games, which will just make the regular season more exciting than it already was. And I think it also will continue to kind of, I feel like the NBA has definitely been trying to push that the regular season is not going to seem as, not to say meaningless, but it feels like there's stretches that don't mean as much just because nobody's playing, people are playing every other night, stuff like that. And I think they're trying to get away from that. And I think they've put all of these things into place to where this next upcoming season, you'll definitely see a big difference in the competition levels of the teams that you're going to be playing on a nightly basis. And you're going to see a lot less games where you're playing a team like the Clippers and there's no Kawhi and PG, or the Lakers without LeBron and AD. They're at least going to have at least one of those guys on any given night.
Yeah, I'll say about the resting idea. I think the idea is good in theory, right? Like I think it's a good idea in theory. But I will say I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit. It's like they can just potentially say, hey, instead of saying it's a rest day, they could just say it's a real injury. And how would the team or the people that are, you know, tracking this know the difference in that? You know what I mean? So I really think that's probably the one pushback I'd give on that because it's like, man, they could just do that. But at the same time, like you said, I think the 65 game thing is kind of going to change some things. Um, and in the sense of people are going to want to play, like guys are going to want to make All NBA and make All Star and really get those awards. Not really All Star, but just to get those awards, especially to meet the criteria for that. So I do think it'll work a little bit. I mean, I think the Grizzlies I'm not gonna say they followed this to a degree last year, but they did in the sense of they didn't. You rarely saw them rest two-star players. Usually, the actual player was hurt. Because I remember going to that back to back and they rested Bane one game, but he wouldn't go under the thing. But I think Jaren and Ja played the back to back. But and now going forward this year, if they have a back to back, one of the two got to play instead of both of them can sit. So I think that's pretty. It's interesting in a way because I do think again I think how many players? It's like 49 players are affected by this. So some of them will matter for, some of it won't. It'll be different for each player. And their situation to their teams. But I mean, I think it's a decent idea. I just don't know if the execution is going to be great, just because I think people are still going to rest and have rest days. Because ultimately, with the new CBA, they didn't get rid of back to backs or eliminate a lot of back to backs. So with that, some teams are going to rest on back to backs, including the Grizzlies. Like it's just what it is. I'm not saying they're going to not play back to backs, but like they're going to use one or two of the back to backs in the regular season and say, hey, you're going to rest. Like they're going to do that still. Like it's just going to happen because you still got too many back to backs for how the game is played now and the amount of talent and the pay. Like they're gonna rest. But again, now it's just trying about limiting the rest. That's what they're trying to do, especially like you said for the road games and people trying to see star players during those games. They're trying to appease the fans to some degree, and obviously the players and making sure they're following what they need to do from a contract standpoint. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be cool. I don't know how much of effect it'll have. We might not even notice it for real. You know what I mean? It's kind of like with the playing tournament, or not playing tournament, but the in-season tournament. How basically, it's in the season, but like we might not even really notice it in outside of maybe one extra game. So it might be one of those situations, but we'll see. The NBA makes a lot of new changes, and you just kind of have to wait and see how it kind of progresses. Because we can talk about it all day about what it'll do, but until we actually see it play out, um, we don't really have too much to say about it. So yeah, I mean it'll be interesting, but yeah, I don't think it'll affect the Grizzlies that much. Like we got young
Yeah.
players. Like we got 23, we got 24-year-olds. We got a 25-year-old and two 24-year-olds as our best players. Like they're gonna play. Like I'm not worried about them not playing a back to back all the time. Like they're gonna play. They might have a rest day here too, but they're gonna play. Like I'm not worried. This is more for like older teams, like you said. They have a little bit leeway. Like Golden State, Los Angeles, like those type of teams a little bit older, so it might affect them a little bit more. But yeah, like for us, I'm not really. I bet it probably won't even like be a thing in my mind when I think about it for real. So as the season goes on, so
Nah,
yeah,
like for me, I think it's gonna have an effect, but it'll be more like you'll end up like I feel like every time that the Grizzlies have played the Clippers over the last two seasons, they have never played them fully healthy. Like either Kawhi
yes,
doesn't play, Paul George, like it'll be stuff like that, and I think you'll notice it in games against certain teams that have a lot of like rested and stuff like that in their history. You'll notice that you're actually going to have to play Kawhi and Paul George, fully healthy. Whereas for the last two seasons, a lot of teams haven't had to do that because at least one of them is resting, or if not both of them. So I think that's something that you'll see, and I think you'll see the same thing with like teams like the Lakers, the Warriors. The Warriors did a lot of it last year, especially Clay coming back from injury and stuff like that. So I think that'll be something else. I mean, you could even go into I think they mentioned it in one of the articles where the Warriors have played all their guys and they went on the road on a back to back and they set Steph, Clay, and Draymond, and that's just not going to be allowed next season, and they're going to investigate that and probably get fined for it. But there's a possibility you might see some teams just take the fines too. Not to say that that's something that I think they're going to want to do because obviously they want the money, but there'll be some teams that might just take the fines in certain situations. And then just to be clear, this obviously does not apply to real injuries. If you're actually hurt there. They said that now the NBA did say they might have second opinions and have NBA doctors instead of just team doctors come and make sure that these guys are not faking injuries or something just to be rested. And another thing is at the end of the season, they're still going to be like if you've already locked up your playoff spot, you can rest your players. Like it's not going to be stuff like that at the end of the season. But you also won't be able to see stuff like where the Trailblazers last year were just like, we're out of the playoffs, so Damian Lillard is not going to play the last 11, 12 games of the season. That's not going to be allowed anymore. If Damian Lillard is healthy, Damian Lillard is playing, all that kind of stuff. So that I think it's going to be like little stuff. So I think the bigger thing you'll notice will be probably more near the end of the season. You're not going to get as many of these, oh, this team is tanking, so we're definitely not going to see Damian Lillard tonight, or we're definitely not going to see Bradley Beal tonight. I think that's going to be where it's going to have the biggest change, and I think it might have an effect on the standings at the end of the season a little bit, just because there's going to be less of those like kind of cupcake games, just because everybody's going to be playing. But yeah, I don't think it's going to affect the Grizzlies that much. Obviously, they have two players that are technically affected by this, but like you said, last season there weren't many games where both of them missed games, and since it doesn't affect the rest of the team, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. One thing that they did also mention was because I know you mentioned the thing about how instead of resting, they're going to say players might just be injured. Like I said, the NBA might investigate that, but they're also going to crack down on one of the things I've been talking about the last couple of years is the soreness epidemic in the NBA. The soreness epidemic, man, because everybody is just sore all the time. And it's insane how sore these people are. And it's just like, it'll be randomly where, knee soreness, he's out tonight. And it's like, they're going to be cracking down on that too. You're not just going to be able to say, oh, yeah, he has knee soreness, which I mean, in some situations, maybe they do. But I feel like a lot of the time that just has taken the place of this is load management or rest day.
That happened in the game. I went to with the back to back because BC had like I think like hip soreness and he didn't play the one game. I think he played the first game against New Orleans, second game against Sacramento. He didn't play because of hip soreness, quote unquote hip soreness. I mean, that's what they said. That's what they.
I'm telling you, it's an epidemic across the NBA. I've never seen more sore people than in the NBA, man. Like it's an epidemic. You can go any team. It might be 15 minutes before the game. Damian Lillard right leg soreness out. And it just happen. It happens all season. Like the Grizzlies do it as much as any other team. And like the real thing is I feel like there are some teams that do it, and it's not even like the star players that are always resting. Like I feel like the Grizzlies had players that had soreness for a lot of the year that wouldn't even be affected by this. Like you said,
For sure.
Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane had some of that, but Desmond Bane, I feel like it was more his return from injury. Jaren had some of that early in the season because he didn't play back-to-backs at the beginning of the season. But you can also, the NBA also, like, there's a lot of little stuff. I think when this first came out, a lot of people were like, oh, how are they going to do this? What if somebody's hurt? What if just like the NBA said that obviously if somebody tore their ACL last season, they're not going to be like, why are you resting on a back-to-back? But they will say if it's a back-to-back and one of them's a home game and one of them's an away game, rest a home game. If one of them is on national TV and one of them isn't, you should play the national TV game and not the non-national TV game. Like that's the kind of stuff the NBA is more worried about. And I think on that standpoint, that's going to also have an effect because I think that's something you've seen. But yeah, I think it's going to affect a little bit of the soreness epidemic. It's going to affect who's going to rest what back to back and everything like that. But I I don't know. I think it's going to have a positive effect, but I don't know if it's going to be something that people are going to be thinking about all throughout the season until somebody actually gets fined or it actually starts affecting the teams.
Yeah, it's just funny, man. Like you said, soreness epidemic is a thing that's happened, especially the last 2 years, man. Like you said, like I said, bro. I saw BC on the report said the hip soreness. I mean, especially BC. If we're talking about like soreness, king of soreness for at least the Grizzlies, last 2-3 years, or basically his whole tenure, ever since like his second year. That's all you'll see BC off the list for. But so before this Achilles, obviously, be like hip soreness, leg soreness, back soreness. I'm like, man, what? Like you said, man, what are all the soreness? I be sore. I'm sore every day. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what we doing, man?
Alex, now you too young to be sore every day, man.
No, man.
You can't be
Listen,
doing that.
I get it, but my point is, man, listen, I don't know what these soreness. They're gonna have to basically make sure they're gonna have to go into the depth. No, they're gonna have to stop being vague because, I mean, they're gonna crack down on it. Obviously, but it's just funny, man. Yeah, the soreness epidemic. We'll see how long it lasts, man. I mean, I mean, it might cut it down, but then they just might just go into. They might just use a different way to language it as, or versus like soreness. Like they might use a whole different word for
I
it, or
think my
might
favorite
go
one
into
is
depth.
return from injury management. I think
Yeah,
that's my
that.
favorite one. I
Yeah,
think they're not going to change that one. Which they're also going to be. I think that's the one they're going to use the most. If somebody turns their ankle, they're going to be like, "Yep, we're using that the rest of the season." That's why he can't
yeah,
play the back to back. Remember when he sprained his ankle 7 months ago? Yeah, like
yeah.
I like you're going to see a lot of stuff like that. But as always, I just want to say I appreciate everybody who listened to this week's episode of the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. For my co-host Alex Winton, I'm Bryson Wright, and we'll see y'all on the next episode.